wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show, and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show. This episode is sponsored by Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency.
All right, welcome to another episode of the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host, Rex Biberston, and today we're joined by a very special guest, Ryan O'Hara, the VP of Marketing and Growth at LeadIQ. Ryan, how are you doing today, man?
Good. Thanks for having me, Rex. I feel like I'm kind of excited to do this because a lot of the stuff that I do podcasting for with people is usually heavily diving into prospecting, but you know, I do a lot of stuff in marketing too, so it's kind of fun to talk about growth and just help people out on that end with stuff that we've learned over the years from making mistakes 100 times.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're excited to have you. I think you bring a particularly cool perspective to marketing and growth. So give us first a little background. What is LeadIQ? Where do you guys come from? What do you do?
Yeah, so LeadIQ looks at the situation right now with prospecting and realizes that there are a ton of people out there that want to do prospecting and research their prospects before they reach out. The problem is the current sales stack that's out there doesn't really support that workflow for people. So we found a way to make it so it's easy for prospectors out there to go get contact data off the web where they're starting their research on their prospects and finding their prospects. And it makes it really easy to get contact information and get those into your different sales tools so that you can do more selling every day with way less work. And that's kind of what we've been working on. It's evolved over time. It used to be, you know, a smaller tool and a different tool that solved a different problem. And through iterations of success and failure, we've found something that fits really well for us now.
Yeah, very good. I hear good things about it. I've got clients who use it and love it. And certainly a fan of the work you guys are doing as far as helping us to have more intelligent prospecting. But we're going to dive into that a little bit today. I know we were talking before the show, and one of the things you wanted to talk about was personalized prospecting. Talk to us about that and what that means for you.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've sort of noticed over the years is, just so people know my background, I'm a VP of Growth and Marketing at LeadIQ, but for years I actually got my start as a BDR out of college. I was the first business development rep at a company called Dyn, who got bought by Oracle last year for $600 million. And we didn't know how to prospect. We were trying to figure stuff out. We were kind of in the dark on it. And, you know, the first thing I did when I joined the company was I looked at what sales reps were doing there and tried to replicate that, and it failed. It did terrible. I was sending templated emails to people. I was blasting people. I was running through and calling hundreds of people every day and not getting a lot of good results from it. And, you know, I'm selling to IT people that like hiss at light and don't want to talk to people at all. I actually ended up learning through trial and error after a while that if you personalize your prospecting and research your prospects first and say more about your prospect than yourself, you'll get good results when you're prospecting and build better relationships. And that's kind of what we're all about here too at the company.
Yeah. And for you, what does personalization mean? Because I know there's a lot of tools that are coming out in this space. There's some services in this space that are focused on personalization of a certain nature. What is relevant personalization to you? Is it, you know, their favorite Spice Girl? Is it, you know, where they went to college? What are the details that you would gather, you know, if you were prospecting today?
So interesting point. I think personalization works two ways. One of the biggest mistakes is all these companies say, oh, like personalization, mention what school they went to and stuff. And that's okay. But at the end of the day, when you're actually prospecting someone, it's really also about you finding a connection with that person. If you think about the relationships that you make in your life, most of the friends that you have, you probably shared common interest with, and that's one of the ways you became friends, whether it was workplace proximity, maybe you like the same bands, same sports teams. So it's all about matching things that fit the rep's interest with the prospect's interest. So if you see someone likes this, let's do the Spice Girls example, it really doesn't make sense to bring that up unless you also like the Spice Girls. Like, people shouldn't fake it. You got to be sincere with this stuff. So it's about matching up and saying some stuff that actually helps the individual as opposed to the company, because people change jobs all the time now. And that's really what it's about. Personalization is about connecting with the human, not the company they work at.
No, that's great. That's great. And I think ultimately we're always talking to human beings, so we forget that sometimes. We think more about the company rather than the person. That's great.
Yeah, I think it's a thing that a lot of people miss the boat on. They think personalization is just about the company, but the thing is, every prospect you talk to, the average person changes jobs once every 17 months. So that means the first 6 months, they're going to be somewhere. They're pretty much new and shy and figuring things out. The next 6 months, they're actually a change agent and they can do some stuff. And the last 6 months, they've got a foot out the door and they're staring at their clock waiting for 5 p.m. every day.
Oh, that's a great point. That's really interesting. So making that connection on a more human level, focused on you as a seller, them as a buyer, and how you two connect personally. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that want to help set goals for that individual person, because let's be honest here, most people, especially in the United States culturally, they're not team first people, they're individual first. That's just how it is at bigger companies too. If you're working at a big company, you're trying to get it sell many seats or something, the appeal to them is going to be things that can help them and make them look good, not their company. Sometimes those things are the same thing, but that's typically how it is.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Now, there's things that we do outside of prospecting, especially when we're talking about growth and marketing and kind of from a bigger picture. We're creating a lot of content. We're sharing a lot of content. You've got a pretty unique way of producing content that gets people engaged. What's your focus when you look at content?
Yeah, so usually I'll try and think of what's a valuable piece of content that I can make. And content, by the way, has been one of the biggest things that's helped LeadIQ grow. We put a lot of work into the content that we make. I think the thing that we do that's really different from a lot of other companies that are in our space is we're not just dropping stats and nuggets and sharing information about prospecting. We're actually trying to make our content entertaining. And it's a lot more fun for me because, when I was a kid, I wanted to write screenplays or write comedy or do something like that. And obviously I'm a realist. I know it's really hard to do that. I'm finding business as my canvas that I can paint on to do that stuff. And if you're listening to this and you're trying to grow your company and figure this stuff out, making your content entertaining not only looks professional and stems off professionality and shows confidence, it makes making the content a lot more fun too. And people resonate and build loyalty to your brand because of it. So a lot of LeadIQ's brand equity is based on entertainment in our content. And you won't believe this, Rex. So many people come up to me at shows and say, "Hey, how big are you guys?" And they just assume that we're way bigger than we are because of how polished and entertaining our content is, because it exudes confidence.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you're not saying it's not professional. You're saying, in fact, it is very professional to use that sort of content. I like that. Now, how polished does it need to be? I mean, are we talking about handheld selfie cam, or are you talking, I've seen your videos. You're doing something really cool with kind of the public service announcements, as it were. And that's very polished. How polished do you need to be if you're trying to get your content to be more entertaining? How far across that spectrum do you need to get?
So over the past couple of years, we were recording a lot of stuff with just using webcams and stuff. And, the results were pretty decent. And this will be a good transition into this conversation here. But one of the things that I started doing this past year is retargeting and remarketing. So if someone consumes my content, we retarget that content and other content that we make on news feeds on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And we do promoted posts and things along those lines. What I realized actually is that if you're doing that and you want better click-throughs on video, because video comes up on timelines in silent mode, you want to have professional looking stuff. So you can actually, for the price of $400 or $500, you can make yourself a pretty nice home studio. I home make and home edit all of our video and video content stuff. And I'm not a great editor. I didn't go to film school or something. I just figured it out and kind of self-taught myself.
So for those who are, let's say, starting at the very beginning, they've got an early stage company, or they've got a company that's existed for a long time, but they want to get into this more entertaining content field. What would you suggest? I don't know if it's necessarily a set of tools, but what would you suggest they start with? Is it video? Is that kind of your primary driver of the entertaining content?
Well, I think it's easiest to put together video and audio because writing is actually a very important skill set to have. But if you have trouble writing, it can take a lot of time. For me to make a video, I can literally sit down and talk to you for 20 minutes and have a great piece of content together, or I could go type something up with you, and it takes way more time and work. So if you're someone that's a founder or working at a startup and you just have a ton of stuff on your plate, video and audio are both very easy things to do. And most PCs and Macs now come with native software where you can edit. So you don't even have to do a whole lot of work on that end. You don't have to be a maestro or a masterpiece to do editing. You just basically record something and do lots of cuts so it's easy to consume and watch.
All right, today's growth story is Aegis Software, a company that makes software for manufacturing operations. They were one of the first companies in their space to invest in search marketing, but as competition grew, their performance plateaued. To counter this, they hired Directive Consulting, the B2B search marketing agency. With unparalleled experience in inbound lead gen for B2B companies, Directive was able to increase Aegis's monthly online leads by 457%, while at the same time lowering their cost per lead by 147%. Now I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too, so head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
That's great. And what platforms are you sharing most of that content on? You talked about retargeting the content, but is it mostly through LinkedIn since you're targeting sales professionals and sales leaders?
Yeah, ever since LinkedIn launched their video stuff, we've been doing well. I'm not trying to brag, but like literally every piece of content I make these days is getting like at least 10 or 15,000 views. And it's because
that's great.
Yeah. LinkedIn. Well, thank you. But like one of the great parts is LinkedIn really wants people using it for video. Yep. Unfortunately, this is where the entertainment part's really important. There are more and more people making it. So it's turning into like driving on the highway during rush hour. So if you're going to do stuff and you're going to be in rush hour, make your stuff entertaining. Make it so that like, if I'm going to be on LinkedIn, I'm getting a wall of videos in my newsfeed. Make sure that the content you have is the best one so that people comment and engage on it. And the other neat part is it builds up brand loyalty toward us too. I see so many people that will post and say, hey, I'm looking for a sales data tool and I need help. And I'll see all these people bombard and praise LeadIQ that don't even use LeadIQ. And I'm just like, holy crap, how is this happening? And it's because they've built loyalty up to us and they want to help us because they like us.
Yeah, this is great. No, this is great stuff. Talk to us a little bit more about the building an audience, maybe how you guys started or how you would suggest someone starts to grow that initial following, grow the people who are interested in the brand and then eventually loyal to the brand.
Yeah, I think one thing that people kind of underrate is that as a marketer, I think one thing that saved me is having a sales job first. Being a BDR has helped me so much because when I first joined LeadIQ, we had nothing. Like we didn't have a ton of, we had relationships with our founders basically and their relationships that they had. I had my previous relationships in my old companies. When you're starting from zero, I think the best thing to do is actually make content with other people. Find other people that are trying to reach the same audience that you are, because guess what? I might make a podcast and it might only get listened to by 30 sales reps. But if I were a sales rep and I can go into a room and talk to 30 people that are prospects all at the same time, I'd pay a lot of money to do that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It's really about that. So if you're making content with people, use that and say, hey, let's co-promote this thing together. Let's do things together. We exclusively made content with influencers for the first year and a half that we worked here. Now they come to us and we do stuff with them and help them out when they're on their second venture and third venture. But you know what? I think a big part of that is you've got to pair up and do tactics with people that share the same audience that you do.
So if you're going to an influencer, what can you offer them, other than producing and sharing the content? Obviously, they're bringing a bigger network than you are at the very beginning. What can you provide them that you think would be beneficial to them? Is it just another platform upon which they can share their story and then they can share that back to their own audience? Or is there something else you offer them additionally?
Yeah, I'll put it in perspective. So for us at LeadIQ, my content goal is to have 3 pieces of content every week. I try to have 1 blog post, 1 video post, 1 podcast. And the podcast might be every other week. And if it isn't, I sub it out with another blog post. But those 3 pieces are kind of my goal that I try to shoot for every week. If you're a startup and you're a founder, or if you're working at a big company and you're putting out a lot of content, you're always going to want more content. You're always going to want more things that you can then put on your site. If I do a podcast, let's say I had you, Rex, on a video with me, and I put it on LeadIQ, I'm putting you in front of a bunch of salespeople. If I didn't have a lot of salespeople yet, though, you can still put that content out on social. You can still put that content on your website as well. And now you have a free piece of content that is making people remember that Rex exists and you should be working and talking to Rex. Like, the idea is to be seen everywhere and not be annoying while you're being seen everywhere. I think people are willing to do that and actually deal with the content creation part, because it amplifies it. Like for right now, for example, I'm actually hiring a marketing person to help me make another wall of content because I want to double my output. I want to have 6 pieces of content every week instead of 3.
Very good. This is great. This is great to get us at least started, let's say, with kind of this process. And then as you scale it up, that makes sense. You're going more and more great content. I love that focus, though, on always being entertaining. And obviously, you coming from a sales background, you have a really good perspective of how that relates back to driving growth and revenue. That's fantastic. Well, Ryan, one last thing I have to ask you about, because for people who haven't seen Ryan online, you got to go check out his videos. And obviously, that's kind of the topic that he's touching on here. He wears a tuxedo in a bunch of these videos. And Ryan, give us the reason behind the tux, right? There's something, you did a public service announcement about why there's even a tuxedo that you wear to trade shows. Like, what do you bring to the table with that?
Yeah. So one thing that I like to think about is when everyone's zigging, you want to go out and zag. You always want to try and stand out and make people stop and say, what the hell's going on there? What happened was we're doing a series of public service announcements that are sales tips for people. And they're a parody of The More You Know that NBC does, like the more you know.
Yep.
Like we're doing a bunch of those. And I got a tuxedo for my wedding last year. And I was ticked that I haven't had a chance to use it again. Like I'm not going to the opera or galas or anything. I'm in New Hampshire. There's not really things for it. So like I was trying to think of a way to come up on a news feed and make people stop and be like, what the hell is that? And so you see a guy in a tux, you're going to click it and be like, what the hell's going on there? And you see that image and it works really well. When we go to trade shows, I wear crazy suits sometimes and people come up and take pictures with me and talk to me about it. And it's a great icebreaker because you can talk about something like that isn't just me pitching my product. So if you can do, if you have anything that you can do to stand out and be different, we have a chance now with all these tools and platforms that are out there that you can do all these tactics on. You have such a chance to stand out and kind of, in a lot of ways, not to sound arrogant, but be famous and get people to notice you from doing this stuff.
Sure. At what point, there's people who are going to hear this and maybe they're going to go buy the green suit with question marks and look like the Riddler. Like at what point does it go too far? I mean, obviously a tux, it's kind of funny. It's professional and classy, but at the same time, obviously outlandish. At what point does it go too far? Like, is there a limit for how far you go and what you could call peacocking or something like that?
Yeah. I definitely, by the way, I use the word peacocking for this because it's exactly what it is. I think the problem is if you see more people doing it, you got to find something else to do instead. That's the idea, is to always try and find a new way to innovate and do something that's completely different from what everyone else is doing. I think it will get too far at some point. You're going to see people do that. So like, you see that, find a new thing that you can do to capitalize on that's a little different. Sometimes it's just little subtle things. One person I always like to think about, there's a guy named Phil Gerbyshak who does a lot of stuff on social selling and giving advice on that. Phil goes to every conference that he goes to. He wears he has a bunch of different colored glasses, and that's his thing. He wears colorful glasses. And he built a brand around that. He's not reinventing the wheel. He's still wearing a normal suit at these conferences and stuff. But the colorful glasses help frame his mind and frame his brand a little bit to be something. Seth Godin's known for wearing orange glasses, for example. Like there's these people that we know that are individual brands that just go and do stuff like this. And there's subtle things you can do to build a brand and be a little bit different.
Right. That's fantastic advice. I love it. I think this is very, very relevant for today for people who are trying to stand out in a really crowded market. And the world is just getting more crowded as far as selling and marketing. So this is fantastic. Thank you, Ryan, for being on the show. And where can people find you online if they want to follow you?
Yeah, so if you want to follow all our content, we put a lot of stuff out on the LeadIQ blog. So you just go to LeadIQ and hit the blog button. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, I do a lot of posting on there as well with opinions and things that I'll go get cool people to talk to. And I'll probably do something with you at some point, Rex, too. But like we go and talk to people and pick their brains about what they're thinking about with prospecting and sales. One last piece of advice I have to give to everyone. If you're listening to this, a good litmus test if you're producing content, if you're doing marketing, if you're sending emails, ask yourself if your family and friends saw it, would you be proud of it? And if that answer is no, throw it out and do something better. That's really the way you should be approaching everything with this stuff.
Excellent. Ryan, that's a great perspective. We appreciate you being on the show, man.
No problem. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
There are lots of ways to build a community, and we've chosen to build the B2B growth community through this podcast. But because of the way podcasts work, it's really hard to engage with our listeners. And without engagement, it's tough to build a great community. So here's what we've decided to do. We're organizing small dinners across the country with our listeners and guests. No sales pitches, no agenda, just great conversations with like-minded people. We'll talk business, we'll talk family, we'll talk goals and dreams. We'll build friendships. So if you'd like to be a part of a B2B growth dinner in a city near you, go to b2bgrowthdinners.com. That's b2bgrowthdinners.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.